Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the WGSN-DB Going Solo Network, Going Solo Veterans Corner. I'm your host, retired Army First Sergeant and author Paul Holbert, broadcasting live from Northern Virginia. This is our debut airing, and our goal is to connect U.S. veterans sharing their experiences and how they've made adjustment back to civilian life, what they're doing now to make a difference in their new lives and their communities. But before we get started, I want to take just a minute to thank our sponsor, Quest Jewelers of Merrifield, Virginia. Visit questjewelers.com for fine jewelry, one-of-a-kind custom pieces. If you can imagine it, Quest Jewelers can make it. And I want to especially thank owners Pete and Juan Tane for supporting our veterans program. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to tonight's guest. Let's meet LaShonne Williams Parker. LaShonne is a 6-year Army veteran who attained the rank of a sergeant in the administrative field and now works as a federal employee in Washington, D.C. I won't tell you where she works. If she wants to share that with you later, she can do that. But she's joining us live from Maryland. So hello, Sean. How are you doing?
Hello, I am doing great, Paul. Thank you for having me.
Oh no, I'm glad to have you on the show because I think you've definitely got an interesting story to tell, and I think our listeners will really appreciate it. So, as we get into this, what I'd like to do is start off first and have you share some of your military experiences with us. Tell us what made you decide to get into the Army in the first place.
Okay, so I was a spoiled little brat at home, and my parents did everything for me, cooked everything. I did work, but then one day my father said, this was right out of high school, he said, "You're going to have to get you a full-time job." Well, I thought I was already working a full-time job when I worked at Safeway. Well, anyway, when he said that, I got upset and I went to an Army recruiter. And it's kind of unfortunate for my dad, and my mom, because when I signed up, I didn't tell my father that I was going until it was 2 weeks time for me to deploy.
So that was kind of a spite enlistment then, wasn't it? I'll show you, huh?
Yes, it was. But I've learned since then. I've learned a lot. Yes.
Yeah, so I understand you went in first to be a military policeman, correct?
Yes, I did. I wanted to be a military police officer. Then I wanted to come home and be a county police officer. I was a daring young lady then. I was 18 at the time. And somehow,
Well,
go ahead.
oh no, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, well, there's nothing wrong with that, and I would imagine you would occasionally think about maybe I'll be able to pull my dad over sometime, huh?
But if you can imagine an 18-year-old going to talk to an Army recruiter, so I got derailed to to an administrative role.
Hmm.
But that
Yeah,
was fine because I learned a lot. I learned a lot when I was in the Army.
yeah. So can you share with us? I mean, where were some of the places you were stationed while you were in?
Well, actually, I went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and I had never been to South Carolina at that time. It was my very first time away from home. And as I mentioned, I was actually a girly girl. So when I went to the Army, I had my pink pajamas, my lavender pajamas, but that changed really quickly when I went to boot camp. And then after that, I went to Fort Sam Houston, Texas, at Fort Sam in San Antonio, Texas. And I loved it. I loved it so much that I stopped calling home. They had to call me.
You stopped calling you love the Army that much, huh? Well,
I
if
love
that was just out of curiosity, if you enjoyed it so much, I know you said you spent 6 years in. So what was it that made you decide to get out or not stay? Was there anything in particular that made you say, you know what, I think I'm going to do something else now?
Well, when I look back now, I wish I had stayed in. But at that time, I had a knucklehead for a husband at that time. And then I had children. My 6th year in the 6th year, I didn't realize it, but I was down in Fort Bragg with the airborne rangers down there, and I was in the field. I was actually in the field unit, so I spent a lot of time in the field down in Fort Bragg with the 82nd Airborne Division. And during that time, there weren't a lot of females, so sometimes I was like two one of the two females in the field with all of these guys, these soldiers. But what I would say is that during that time, I started thinking about, what the civilian world was like versus the military. And I saw a lot of things in the military that I thought was kind of different. And so that coupled with my knucklehead husband, I decided after my 6th year, I would go ahead and get out. And the last time I was in the field, I didn't realize that I was pregnant at the time that I was in the field. So that sort of helped me make my decision. But I wish I had stayed in.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I can understand that. I've talked to a number of people that have said once they left the service, they said, had I known what I know now, I probably would have stayed. And I stayed and made a career out of it, and I don't regret it. But a lot of people do. They think that it's something when they look back on it and say, yeah, I kind of wish I would have stayed. But I had a similar experience when you were talking about being in the field with all those guys. When I became a first sergeant, I was a first sergeant of a unit, first time in my life that was full of female soldiers. So out of 152 people, I had 63 females for the first experience in my life as a first sergeant.
Wow.
So it does tend to throw you a curve, doesn't it, when you're dealing with something like that?
Yes. let me share this little story. I went to a place called Fort Indiantown Gap. That's when I went to the NCO school, to become a sergeant. And when I was there, there were about maybe 4 females there. I was one of the 4, and the rest were men. And I tell you, they stared at me. I felt like they stared at me the entire time. And I often went, why are they staring at me? So eventually the days went by, we all got to know each other, and they told me they had never served with a female at that time. And that was why they were in awe, I guess. They had females in their class.
You were like something they had never seen before, huh?
Yes, I guess you could say that.
Well, I mean, so once you decided to leave, how proud, I'm sorry, how was your transition to civilian life and becoming a federal employee like you're doing now? How was that transition and what happened?
Okay, it was actually tough for me because I was used to being in the military, and I was used to having all of the regulations and things to point to and the fast pace. And when I went to the federal government, my first job was at the Internal Revenue Service. I was actually a clerk typist at the time, GS2. And so it was tough for me actually to adjust to the civilian world. It was slow, like a slower pace for me. My sister used to tell me I was really direct. She used to tell me I was mean, but I don't think I was mean. I guess I was that military person.
Yeah, that sounds a little familiar. My first civilian job, I was used to the military regimen, and I'm used to when they said you have a staff meeting at 8:30. By 8:30, you're sitting in there waiting. And the time I went to my first civilian staff meeting, I'm sitting in there at 8:30 with another Air Force vet, and 10 minutes later, people are still filtering in. So yeah, I can understand that. It takes some adjustment, didn't it, at first? But so you started as a GS2, you said, right?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. So you hung up the BDUs and the boots and put on civilian clothes. And so where have you worked since then? How has your career progressed?
Okay, so I've worked in several federal agencies. I've worked at the Internal Revenue Service. I've worked at the U.S. Postal Service headquarters. I was there about 16 years. And then I worked at the agency where I am now. And then I went to another agency, the Department of Interior. And then now I'm back at the agency where I work now.
Okay, so how long have you been a civilian employee now?
Oh my goodness. It's
Did
been
I throw you for a loop there?
I think it's been since 1987, and yes, I'm old. It has been since 1987.
I wasn't insinuating that. I just figured I threw you for a loop because it made you think for just a minute.
Yeah. I have it here, it's been 37 years since I was in the military.
Oh my gosh.
That's a long time.
Yeah, and I thought I was getting old, having retired just about 20 years ago now. So you know your experience in hanging up your boots is well beyond me. So, but it's good. It sounds like you really made a great adjustment to the civilian career. So how much longer do you plan to how much longer do you plan to work? Or are you getting close to retirement, or what's your plans?
Well, I won't tell you how long I plan to work because we're on a live show. However, I can tell you that I'm enjoying what I'm doing. And
Yeah.
along the way, I've met so many great people. I have an opportunity to be mentored. I mentor people. I coach people. People coach me. So I'm enjoying it right now. I'm enjoying working hard and delivering.
Well, I mean, that's always important that you enjoy what you're doing.
Mhm.
So if you don't mind me asking, you don't have to tell us where you work, but what is it you're doing now?
Hmm. I'm a senior advisor at an agency. I'm doing a lot of things. I have my hands involved in a lot of things, and especially with the COVID-19 response right now. And I am just trying to be not stressed and produce quality work.
Yeah. So how's your telework going?
Okay, my telework is going okay. I'm in my office now. This is where I come every morning. I get up every morning as if I'm going to leave the house. I even say to my husband, "Okay, honey, I'm going to work," and he'll laugh. I said, "Then aren't you going to tell me to have a great day?" But I'm just coming downstairs to the office. I put my clothes on. I get myself together. I don't always have my hair like this. I don't wear makeup every day, except for when I'm on camera.
Well, I mean, I have to confess to you, I don't wear makeup every day either, so don't worry about it. You and I are two of a kind there, and I'm sure my wife is very glad that I don't wear makeup when I go, when I get ready to log into work. Um, Yeah, so it's good. It sounds like the adjustment you made after leaving the military worked really well for you, and that you're really happy at this point in your life with what you're doing. And I do understand you just got remarried not too long ago, right?
Yes, it has been, let me see, it's been 6 years. However, it seems like it's been 36 because it has been great. It has
Oh,
been
okay.
it has been wonderful. I have a patient husband.
Well, that's great. And I'm sure you're not just saying that because you're on live broadcast either,
No.
right? Well, you had talked to me before, and you had talked about a happy time after you left the military as you settled in, your happy milestone. Can you share a little bit about that with us?
Okay, yes. Let me say this, Paul. I have always had goals and morals and a drive and motivation, and I had the best two children of my life. And I used to tell my children, I used to call my son, I had one son, I used to tell my son, "You are my favorite son," ever since he was a little boy, like 2, 3 years old. And I would tell my daughter, "You are my favorite daughter." And then by the time my son got around, maybe about 5 years old, he looked at me one day and said, "Mommy, am I your only son? Do you have another son?" I knew at that point he started using his analytical skills and started to think about what I was saying to him.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
my favorite son, and she was my favorite daughter. And so I
So,
was, go ahead. Mhm.
oh no, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, yeah, go ahead and tell us a little bit about your kids. Tell us a little more
Okay.
about
I adore my children. They're grown now, of course. Well, my daughter's grown now, but
them.
I adored them so much that I'm so glad that I knew that I adored them, and I told them all the time that I loved them, and I told them, I just showed them affection. I disciplined them. I loved them. I talked about them all the time. I gave them everything they needed and most things they wanted, but it was always with a lesson. I was the brat, the spoiled brat coming up. I taught them the difference between being a spoiled brat and spoiled. There is a difference. And my
Yeah.
children, they just were great kids. I told them all the time, I was just happy to have them as my children. I didn't know what parents did that had bad kids because I didn't have that with them. Thank goodness, because I gave my parents a run for their money.
So at least you weren't paid back in spades by your own kids, right?
Correct. Correct. And I'm very happy about that.
So would you mind sharing a little more about your daughter and what she's doing and
Yes.
how her life is going?
Okay. So my daughter is, I think I can tell her age. She is 31 years old. She's doing fantastic in her life and in her career. She graduated from college in 2012. She has worked at, I want to say, maybe about 4 different federal agencies. She's climbed the ladder. She's doing extremely well. And every time she comes to me, Paul, and she says, Mommy, this person gave me this compliment. Mommy, this person said this about me. I always think to myself, I surely hope that that's because of what I did to support you in your life and encourage you. But she reminds me of myself, even though I'm sure she probably wouldn't like for me to say that.
I do have to tell you, I mean, it's always a good thing when your kids start to realize, and I don't want to choke myself up, but it's like I told my wife a little while ago, a couple of years on Father's Day, my
Mhm.
youngest one sent me a Father's Day card, and I was really touched by it. And he said, one of the biggest compliments anyone could ever pay me is that I'm like my father.
Mhm.
So, when your kids tell you something like that, I
Mhm.
know it does. It gave me such a good feeling because, my youngest one, he could be a challenge when he was growing up,
Mhm.
and to know that he finally understood and learned all the things that we as parents try to teach our children,
Mhm.
and kind of show them how you know the lessons of life, things that we've learned, and of course they always seem to realize that once we get or once they get older, they
Mhm.
realize that we were right most of the time, don't they?
Right. Hopefully they realize that.
Yeah. So your daughter's name is Ashley, right?
Yes, Ashley.
Yeah. Okay.
And yeah, I just adore her very much.
Well, that's good. I mean, it sounds like that you've really made a good transition from the military life into civilian life, and you've really had a successful career thus far after leaving the service. So before we go any further, just for a minute or two
Mhm.
here, would you mind sharing with us just some of the other community type events that you're involved with? Because I know you're pretty busy with your community.
Yes, I'm always doing something. Well, without going into the next segment,
Right.
um, I'm asked to mentor people, and we'll talk about that later,
Yeah.
and coach people through different things. And I'm not a professional, a licensed therapist or anything like that. I'm just a regular human being who has experienced quite a few things in life. And I try to be real with myself. I feel like I'm a genuine person, so I talk to people genuinely and I have integrity. And I just hope that others see that in me. And so I've done some public speaking at different events. Um, at this,
Well, weren't you? I'm sorry, but weren't you at one time a member of Toastmasters?
oh, yeah. Well, in recent years, I am still a member, but in recent years, my role at work has been so active that I just haven't been able to participate. But yes, and I would say that Toastmasters has really, it really helped me. I'll tell you a quick story about Toastmasters. I had just started Toastmasters and I started learning how to present myself, even if I were nervous, how to manage through the nervousness, because sometimes that never goes away. And one day I had to give a presentation to the director of the agency that I worked for at that time. And I was frightened, but I knew that the senior person that I worked for was going to do the presentation. I was there to support her and back her up. Well, she, for some reason, didn't come to work, and I had to step in that role. And I think I had like 3 days to help my knees to stop shaking and get my presentation in order. And I tell you, Paul, that was one of the best presentations that I have ever given. because of Toastmasters and what I learned there. And I would recommend it to anyone.
Yeah, so it really paid off for you, didn't it?
Definitely. And of course, I do always have my hands in different things.
Okay. Well, I tell you what, before we go on to the next segment, I think we've reached the time for our commercial break.
Okay.
So we're going to take a commercial break here very briefly, and we'll be back in just a moment. Okay. So we're back from our commercial break. Welcome back. You're listening to the Veterans Corner on the WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. And we're talking still with Army veteran LaShonne Williams Parker. So let's get back to our discussion. So LaShonne, we've talked a little bit about your military experience and your current career. And you've been very successful in, I can just tell from talking with you now, you're very proud of what you've been able to accomplish, and rightfully so. But, I want to now take you to the part of the show where, I'd like for you to talk to us about an event that changed your life and nearly sent you spiraling, and how you dealt with it. So, would you share that with us?
Yes. And before I get into that, I just want to say that before this tragedy happened in my life, I was the happiest woman on earth with, as I mentioned, my children, my life, my career. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's all right. Take your time.
I'm sorry. I don't even know where that came from.
Take
But
your time.
anyway, so one night I got a phone call from a woman who was screaming on the other end of the phone. It was my son's best friend's mother. And she screamed out, my son's name is Courtney, and I call him Man. We call him Man. So she screamed on the phone and she said, LaShonne, Courtney just got shot. And my heart dropped. I tell you, Paul, this was the most devastating moment of my life. I tell you, all that motivation and that drive and inspiration and all of that I once had, even the goals, they dissipated. They left. I could not think straight. I do commend the police officers who I talked to and the medical staff that I talked to when I got to the hospital, but I finally found out where my son was. I didn't have any information. I actually didn't even know if that was him. I asked him if I could go to the hospital where they say that they had a gunshot victim. He was shot. I got to the hospital, Paul, and of course they take you into this little room. And when you go into an emergency room, they take you into this little room. Something is not quite right. So I really wasn't myself. I wasn't thinking clearly. In my mind, I just had lost everything. So when I got in the room, and I remember a police officer coming in to talk with me, he sat down in front of me, and he was very calm. And he started asking me questions about my son. He said, "Is there any way that you can identify him?" And I'm thinking to myself, I have no other way other than he's a black boy. He's 16. And then I thought about something. When he turned 16, he had been begging me to get him a tattoo. And he and I had a conversation about it. Couldn't be anything crazy, and he had to spend his own money on it, and it had to be a certain amount of money. So he found a tattoo with his name, MANN, his nickname Man, and it was on the inner side of his arm because I didn't want it anywhere else on his body. And so I thought about that, and then that's when the police officer calmly told me what he had to say, which was that I think he started out by saying, there's never a good way to tell somebody this. So when he said that, everything just stopped. I felt like my heart stopped, and I listened to him, but I felt like I was having an out-of-body experience. And that's when he told me that it was my son. And then he told me that it doesn't look like he's going to make it. That was another level of pain and hurt and confusion that came over me. And so we talked for a little while, and I don't really remember much of what happened, but then the medical person came in, a woman came in, and she sat down in front of me, and she said, your son's heart has stopped 3 times already. I would like for you to go, would you like to go in to see him, because we don't know when it's going to happen. And I think I freaked out. I said I didn't want to see my son because I didn't want to see him like that. And she sat me down and she calmly said to me, I don't want you to leave this hospital and regret that you did not see your son. And I am so grateful that she did say that, because I went back to see him. Of course, it was an awful sight with the blood. He was shot in the head twice. However, if you're a mother and I'm a Christian, and you know you have a relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ, and you've been taught a lot of things about God's ways. When I walked into the room, Paul, even though my son was lying there on the bed with blood running out of his nose and the white bandage on his head with the blood stains, my son was not present. I could tell my son had already passed. I could tell that I could feel in my spirit that it was just his shell. So my son had actually gone out to what the DMV area calls the Go-Go. It was a teenage club. And as he was leaving the club, he drove away. 5 minutes into him driving and on his way home, another car came up, pulled up beside his car, which was my car, and started shooting. And my son was hit in the head twice. I was distraught. I was depressed. I had never experienced anxiety. I developed anxiety, panic attacks. And then, of course, as you know, when those things happen, it brings a toll on your body. And so then sometimes these other chronic health conditions start to surface. And so I had to struggle through those. And it has been on February the 11th this year, 14 years. And I feel like it happened just recently. And there are a lot of things that I've had to deal with all these years and cope with. And I thank God that I do have a relationship with God. I thank God that I have this strong faith. I thank God that I have family, I have friends, even people who I didn't know. I thank God that I was connected with a support group, a group of 6 people. And I tell you, we connected so tightly. We don't see each other anymore, but we still stay connected. Every now and then we'll call each other. And I think the reason we don't really stay connected now is because once you learn how to and you figure out how to live again, if you make the choice to live again, it's hard to go back to thinking about reliving, being re-victimized of your pain and your hurt.
Well, I can just share with you, we're getting some live comments
Mhm.
during the show,
Mhm.
and One, Teresa on here calls you a woman of wisdom. Brenda said you're wonderfully blessed. And Johnny says you have such strength. So you're getting a lot of live comments on here from people I think that are following what you're saying. Some of them I'm sure may be able to identify, some of them possibly with what you're dealing with. And I'm sure it was not an easy thing to go through at the time. So when you finally started coming out of some of that, um, accepting the new reality of your life and what happened, how did you get reacclimated back to your life and society and work? How were you able to get back and function again?
Paul, that was the toughest task I had ever in my life had to endure after my son's death. It started out with, let me see, for the first 8 months, I cried every day and I journaled. That was very important for me. I wrote down my emotions and how I felt and how I was doing. And I was a really angry person. I was the complete opposite of the person, that happy-go-lucky person that I once was. It took a lot of prayer. I don't feel like I'm a strong person. I feel like because I have God in my life, that's what I hold on to. I feel like I can't let go of my hope. I've read books. People can give you scriptures all day long. They do help, trust me, because I have my favorite one that I stood by, and I think it jumped out of the Bible and into my heart. And that was Isaiah 55, 8 and 9, where it says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." So actually, I took that and put it into perspective for myself. I used to ask why, but then all of a sudden in my spirit, one day I heard, "Why not you?" I believe that God has created all of us for a particular purpose and reason. It may not be what we may want it to be, but it's an assignment I believe that we all have. And I believe that we are all connected. We need to support each other. And I don't believe that when things happen to us, that we ought to keep it to ourselves. I believe that we're supposed to share it with other people. I believe from the time that we're born to the time that we die, we should be able to, and other people should be able to see what things that God has put in us to do here on earth. And so it took a lot of prayer. It took a lot of talking with my support group family, my family and my friends. There were times when I was on my way to work crying and I couldn't make it. I would have to pick up the phone and call one of my support group friends, and they would have to either talk me to all the way to work or talk to me so I could turn around and go back home. And many days I went back home. There were times when I wanted to just get up underneath of my bed and stay there and not come out. So other things that I did, one of my friends taught me, she said, "You're going to have to learn to be an actress now because you have to go back out into society." She said, "I don't want you to be like me and how I was." She said, "I could not go back to my job because I had to be put on disability." And those things helped me, even though we were helping each other, to hear them be there to talk me through things. And my church, when I was going to church, I mean, every Sunday, I got something that was special and I believe meant for me. My friends taught me how to express my anger because I would lash out at people because I was angry. Even to this day, 14 years later, around my son's birthday, which is April, was just last week, whenever the 19th was, I feel this feeling. I always call it I'm feeling like I'm in a funk, and I know why. And people who've experienced this know why that they experienced this. And I feel like people grieve differently. Everybody grieves differently. I feel like sometimes people who have not experienced this, they don't have a clue, and we don't want them to have a clue. We don't want them to know what this really feels like, this piercing feeling on the inside. Many things can trigger it. My son was 16. He was still in high school. He didn't get a chance to go to the prom. He didn't get a chance to, I never saw him on a date. I never saw him. He didn't go to the graduation. I went to his graduation where there was a chair by itself with his cap and gown draped across it. That was hard. That was hard for me. So life goes on. People's lives go on, and they should go on. But people don't understand that when I go to a graduation today, I'm there to, yes, support them and the graduate, but I'm also there with a broken heart as a mother whose child didn't get a chance to get to graduation.
Well,
And
let me just, um, I know that as part of your healing,
mhm,
I kind of would like for you to share with our listeners how you got into grief counseling and going to other victims groups. And can you share some of that with us? Because I know
yes,
that was a big part of your healing.
yes, it was. Well, the day I walked out of the funeral home, the church of the day of my son's funeral, I walked out to get into the family car. Before we went to the cemetery, there was a young lady there, standing there. I actually really didn't see her, but somebody told me she was there. She handed me a card. That card was for this Reverend Price. He headed up a support group. He himself is a survivor of homicide victim, which we call ourselves survivors of homicide victims. And he started a group after his son was murdered. And each of the people in that group, I'm trying to think, at the time, none of our murders had been solved but his. So that really helped me. We had an opportunity to scream, to cry, to talk through things, to share how society would re-victimize us, and he taught us how to deal with those things. Um, we learned the judicial system and what would happen if they found the murderers of our children. We just learned a lot. It was a safe place for us to go to mourn, grieve, cry, and even start to laugh and smile with each other, which neither of us at that time thought that we would ever experience joy. But I can say life doesn't stand still, and I have
Mm.
experienced joy since then. And happiness is comes with circumstances, and circumstances can change at any given moment. And so I don't live to be happy, but I do know what unspeakable joy is about and how it feels. And I've read a lot of books. However, reading is great. However, having practical tips was even better for me. I had to see things that were like tangible for me, things that I could see that I could accomplish. I started, I actually didn't come out of my initial grief until 4 years later. 4 years later, I realized, oh my God, I've just been existing on earth. I wasn't really myself. And I really didn't come out of that, after initial recognition of 4 years later, until even much longer after that. When I met my husband 10 years ago, my husband now 10 years ago, um, I was angry then. He had no idea what I was angry about. And
It
it's a
sounds,
process. Hmm?
I was just going to say, I mean, it sounds like now your life is coming full circle.
Yes.
And I know that you're talking about your successful career and, thinking about retiring and enjoying your family life. I know you also talked about having a bucket list you wanted to
Yes.
check off, and I think
Yes.
a lot of us, as we get a little older, we all start having that bucket list. And I'm sure, I'm sure that we're getting a lot of comments on here from listeners that are really touched by your story. So I'm sure that you sharing this has really touched a lot of people. But I'd like to kind of just get you to a happy place again, if you would, because I know this was hard for you. If you had one message
Mhm.
that you would like to leave and share with the listeners today, what would that message be?
That's hard because I don't have just one. I have a whole bunch of messages.
Yeah, I'm sure
But
you do.
okay. Life is a process itself. It is very interesting. Life is a choice. It's a choice because I could have chosen to die with my son, but I chose to live. And if you choose to live, you have to walk in it. If you have a relationship with God or whomever, whatever it is, whatever your spiritual being is, you walk into whatever that is and you stand firm. You put yourself around people who are positive, people who want you to do well. If they see you veering off into a depression state, that they're there to help you and to reach out to people. That is so important, to reach out to people. It's okay to be sad and have those depressed moments, but you can't stay in them too long. You just can't.
Well, I'll tell you what, you got a really touching story, and I just, I just felt when I talked with you about coming on the show that this would be something really important for a lot of our listeners.
Mhm.
So I want to tell you that, I want to thank you so much for being on the show and sharing such personal experience with us. I mean, I know it's difficult for you. I know our listeners can find some inspiration from what you've been through and how you've turned your life around. And so, again, I just want to thank you for spending the time to come on with us. Um, and of course, we're going to wish you the best
Thank you.
moving forward and the best in your marriage and your coming retirement. So I just want to thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, I appreciate you, Paul, for having me.
Yeah, it's been wonderful talking with you, and we'll have to keep in touch, and you'll have to let me know how you're doing.
Okay, I will do that.
All right. Well, thank you, LaShonne. It's been wonderful having you on. So, as a note to our veterans, um, we've got a website that we'd like to put up on the screen. One of the recent pieces of information, even LaShonne had mentioned, is that she's been dealing with some of the coronavirus issues in her agency. So, just as a message to our vets, there's a website up on the screen now that will give information to veterans who receive their compensation and pension payments on what the VA is doing now to ensure that you receive your payments if you're actually receiving VA compensation and pension. So the website is there on the screen. I won't try to read it because it's very long, but it's there on the screen for you, and it will be there on the recorded show as well. So again, thank you, LaShonne, for being on the show. And I want to thank all of our listeners as well for listening to the WGSN-DB Going Solo Network and the Going Solo Veterans Corner. We strive to contact veterans, bringing awesome guests with helpful info which you can keep, and your families will be better informed. So, and I think LaShonne definitely successfully accomplished that this evening. So again, I want to thank you for listening. Again, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Quest Jewelers at questjewelers.com. If you get an opportunity, visit their website. And as I said, if you can imagine it, they can make it. So again, thank you to Quest Jewelers. I also invite you to take a look at my website, theliteraryvet.net, or the books that I've written, and they're also for sale on Barnes and Noble and Amazon. So I welcome you to take a look at my website, literaryvet.net. So for all of us here at the Going Solo Veterans Corner and our debut show, I'd like to thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next show.